I was lying on the cold steel operating table, the blinding lights above me bouncing off silver trays of surgical instruments. The nurse's voice was calm but mechanical. "Deep breaths, Mrs. Rosario. You're doing the right thing." My fingers trembled under the hospital blanket. I could barely see the room through the tears burning in my eyes. My chest tightened, not from fear of the surgery, but from something far heavier. A feeling that I was being forced into this, used. And yet, I said nothing, because my son needed a kidney. Just as the anesthesia needle neared my skin, the operating room doors burst open with a thunderous crash. A gasp rippled through the surgical team. "Grandma!" shouted a small but fiery voice. It was Javi, my 10-year-old grandson, sweaty, breathless, still wearing his school uniform. He held up an old, cracked cell phone like it was a sacred object. "Do you want me to expose the truth about why he really needs your kidney?" The room froze. The surgeon's hands dropped. Through the glass, Bianca, my daughter-in-law, smashed her palms against the observation window, screaming, "Don't listen to him! He's just a child!" But her voice cracked, not with concern, with panic. And at that moment, I knew. My silence could cost me everything. How did I get here? 2 months earlier, my life had been so different. My name is Carmen Rosario. At 58, I lived a simple life in Jackson Heights, Queens, not rich, but complete. Every morning, I woke at 5 to prepare fresh tamales for my small food stand in Corona Park. By noon, I'd be home again, tending to Rafael, my husband of 35 years, who suffered a massive stroke 3 years ago. He sits by our apartment window now, watching the world through quiet eyes, his right side frozen in time, his words trapped somewhere between thought and voice. We came from Santo Domingo with nothing but 4 suitcases and dreams bigger than our fears. Rafael worked construction for 30 years. His hands, building the skyline of a city that wasn't ours until we made it so. I raised our 2 boys, Miguel and Luis, in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled of sofrito and hope. Miguel, my firstborn, grew up handsome and ambitious. Too ambitious, perhaps. He married Bianca, a sharp-tongued woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes. Luis, my youngest, became an electrician, honest and hardworking. Every Sunday, he'd visit with groceries I never asked for but always needed. That Thursday in May began like any other. I was kneading dough for the next day's tamales when my doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. When I opened it, Bianca stood there, mascara streaking down her face, her designer purse clutched against her chest like a shield. "It's Miguel," she gasped. "He's in the hospital. His kidneys are failing." The world tilted beneath my feet. "What? But he was fine last week at dinner." "Well, he's not fine now," she snapped, pushing past me into my small living room where Rafael sat silently observing. "The doctor said it's advanced kidney disease. He needs a transplant. Soon." I steadied myself against the doorframe. "But how? Does it matter how?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut. "He needs a kidney, Carmen. We've already tested Luis. He's not compatible. The doctor said family members are the best option. You need to get tested." I nodded automatically, mother's instinct overriding everything else. Of course I will." What followed was a blur of hospital visits, needles, and waiting rooms. Tests confirmed what Bianca seemed to already know. I was a match. A good one. The doctor, Dr. Patel, a thin man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, explained the procedure carefully, emphasizing the risks at my age. "Mrs. Rosario, this is a major surgery with significant recovery time." "Are you sure?" "She's sure," Bianca interrupted, her hand squeezing my shoulder with surprising force. "She's his mother. Right, Carmen?" I nodded, though something cold settled in my stomach, something beyond fear. That evening, as I prepared Rafael for bed, gently washing his face as he watched me with eyes that still held the man I married, I whispered, "What would you do, mi amor?" No answer came, just the slight pressure of his fingers against mine. The next morning, Bianca appeared at my door again, this time with papers. "The hospital needs your consent," she explained, placing a pen in my hand with efficiency. "Just sign here and here." I hesitated, the pen hovering over the line. I should read it first. "Carmen," her voice dropped to a whisper, "my husband, your son, is dying. Every day you delay is another day he suffers. You're the only compatible one. You have to give your kidney. It's your obligation as his mother." Her words struck like a physical blow. Obligation. As if motherhood was a debt I still owed, even after the decades of sacrifice. I signed. What I didn't know then was that signatures are like silent promises. Once given, they're hard to take back. Within days, news of my sacrifice spread through our tight-knit Dominican community. Mrs. Diaz from the second floor brought me homemade sancocho for strength. Mr. Pena from the bodega refused payment for my groceries. For our neighborhood hero, he insisted. But heroes shouldn't feel trapped, should they? Heroes shouldn't wake at night with doubt crawling up their throat like bile. As the surgery date approached, strange things began happening. Bianca insisted on bringing Miguel's medications herself, refusing my offers to help. She whispered on the phone late at night from the balcony, conversations that ended abruptly when I appeared. And Miguel, my son, my firstborn, seemed to fade more each day, not just physically but in spirit, his eyes avoiding mine when I visited. 1 week before the scheduled surgery, Luis came to visit. After checking Raphael's television setup and fixing the leaky faucet I hadn't mentioned, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. His work-roughened hands cupped a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. "Mommy," he said quietly, "something doesn't feel right about all this." I folded the dish towel in my hands with careful precision. "What do you mean?" "Miguel's decline. It happened so fast. And Bianca." He trailed off, his eyes troubled. "She's worried for her husband," I defended. Automatically. Luis leaned forward. "Mommy, I found something in their bathroom cabinet when I was fixing their sink. A bottle with foreign writing. Not prescribed here." A chill ran through me. "What are you saying?" "I don't know what I'm saying," he admitted. "But I think you should ask more questions before next week." But questions felt dangerous by then. The community already saw me as the selfless mother. The neighbors watched, waiting for the story's happy ending. And somewhere in my heart, a terrible fear had taken root. What if Luis was right? What would that mean about my son, his wife, the life I thought they had? So I stayed silent. And silence, I would soon learn, has a price all its own. The day before my surgery, Javi came to visit. At 10 years old, he had Miguel's eyes, but none of his father's guarded nature. He sat cross-legged on my living room floor, assembling a complex Lego structure, while I prepared arroz con leche in the kitchen. Raphael watched him from his chair by the window, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Abuela," Javi called suddenly, "why are you giving Papa your kidney?" The simplicity of his question caught me off guard. I stirred the rice slowly before answering. "Because your papa is sick, mijo, and my kidney can help make him better." Javi looked up, his dark eyes serious. "But are you scared?" The wooden spoon paused in my hand. No one had asked me that. Not Miguel, not the doctors, certainly not Bianca. Everyone assumed fear was irrelevant in the face of maternal obligation. "Yes," I admitted softly. "I'm a little scared." Javi abandoned his Legos and came to stand beside me. At 10, he was already tall for his age, his skinny frame reaching my shoulder. "Then why do it?" "Sometimes," I explained, "being brave isn't about not feeling scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." He considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Like a superhero." I smiled, though it felt brittle. "Yes, like that." As I served him the warm arroz con leche, sprinkled with cinnamon the way he liked, Javi pulled something from his pocket, an old flip phone with a cracked screen. "What's that, mijo?" I asked, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "I found it," he said, turning it over in his hands. "In the drawer of Mom's nightstand. It's not her regular phone. A second phone, the kind people keep for, secrets. You shouldn't take things that aren't yours," I admonished gently. Javi's eyes flickered with something beyond his years. "I know, abuela, but I heard Mom talking on it last night. She sounded different. Scary different." My heart quickened. "What do you mean?" He fiddled with the phone, not meeting my eyes. "She was saying something about after the transplant and how we'll have what we need and the data will be worth it." He looked up at me, confusion plain on his face. "What data, abuela?" My mouth went dry. "I'm sure it's just grown-up business talk, mijo. Your mother works in pharmaceutical sales, remember?" But even as I said it, pieces began shifting into place. Bianca's insistence on controlling Miguel's medication, her urgent push for the transplant, those late-night phone calls. "Can I stay with you tonight, abuela?" Javi asked suddenly. "Please?" Tio Luis said he'd pick me up for school tomorrow. I hesitated. The surgery was scheduled for early morning. I should be resting, preparing. But the vulnerability in my grandson's eyes made the decision for me. "Of course you can stay." That night, after tucking Javi into bed in our small spare room and settling Raphael for the night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The ancient ceiling fan clicked rhythmically above, barely stirring the humid summer air. On the table before me sat the old flip phone Javi had brought. I hadn't meant to look through it. Invasion of privacy went against everything I believed. But when it vibrated with an incoming text as I was moving it to a drawer, the message flashed across the cracked screen. Transplant tomorrow confirms efficacy. Payment on tissue sample delivery. K. My hands shook as I opened the message thread fully. What followed was a conversation spanning weeks, filled with clinical language about test subjects, pharmaceutical trials, and market value of kidney function data. Miguel's name appeared nowhere, but the timing aligned perfectly with his sudden illness. Cold realization washed over me. My son wasn't sick by chance. This was planned, and I was just another component in whatever scheme Bianca had orchestrated. I was still sitting there, numb with shock, when Luis called. "Mommy, are you ready for tomorrow?" I couldn't form words. "Mommy, are you there?" "Luis," I finally managed, my voice barely audible. "I need to show you something." Within an hour, Luis was at my apartment, his work clothes still dusty from an emergency call. I showed him the phone, the messages. His face darkened as he read, jaw clenching tight. "She's poisoning him," he said flatly. "Slowly. Creating kidney failure to gather data for some pharmaceutical trial. And your transplant is part of it. But why?" The question came out broken. "Why would she hurt her own husband?" Luis's laugh was bitter. "Money, Mommy. Always money with Bianca. This text mentions a 6-figure payment." I pressed my hands against my face. "We have to go to the police." "With what? An old phone with suspicious texts? They'll say we stole it. And what if we're wrong? What if Miguel really is sick and needs this transplant?" The weight of doubt crushed down on me. What if we were wrong? What kind of mother denies her child a life-saving organ based on suspicion? "What do I do?" I whispered. Luis took my hands in his. "Go through with it tomorrow, but I'll be watching Bianca, and I'll bring this phone, just in case." Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, listening to Raphael's steady breathing beside me, to Javi's occasional murmurs from the spare room, my family, my heart. By morning, I had made my decision. I would go to the hospital. I would ask to speak with Miguel alone before the surgery. I would look into my son's eyes and ask him directly if he knew what was happening. But when we arrived at the hospital, everything moved too quickly. Nurses whisked me away for preparation. Bianca was there, efficient and cold, handling paperwork, speaking to doctors. Miguel was already prepped in another room. "Can I see him?" I asked the nurse as she inserted my IV. "After," she promised with a professional smile. "It's better this way." They wheeled me into the operating theater. The lights above were blindingly white. Somewhere, behind the glass observation window, I caught a glimpse of Bianca's face. Not anxious, not grateful, but watchful, calculating. The anesthesiologist approached with his needle. "Deep breaths, Mrs. Rosario. You're doing the right thing." But was I? As consciousness began to slip away, I realized I had never felt more alone, more silenced. And then, like an answer to an unspoken prayer, the doors burst open. "Grandma!" Time seemed to stop in that operating room. Javi stood in the doorway, his small chest heaving, eyes wide with determination beyond his years. The surgical team froze, masks hiding their expressions but their eyes betraying shock. Through the observation window, I could see Bianca's face transform from calculated composure to naked panic. "What is this?" Dr. Patel demanded, his voice sharp with professional indignation. "Who let a child in here?" "Security," someone called. But Javi didn't waver. He rushed to my side, dodging a nurse's attempt to intercept him. His small hand closed around mine. "Grandma, you can't do this," he pleaded. "I know why Dad's sick. I have proof." The anesthesiologist glanced uncertainly at Dr. Patel. The needle hovered inches from my IV line. "This is highly irregular," Dr. Patel said, authority warring with confusion in his voice. "Someone remove this child immediately." "Wait!" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, stronger than I felt. "He's my grandson. Let him speak." Javi held up the cracked flip phone. "I recorded Mom last night, after you went to sleep." His eyes, so like Miguel's, were filled with a child's version of righteous fury. "She was talking to someone about you, about your kidney, in the observation room." Bianca was frantically gesturing to hospital security, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear through the glass. But her eyes, Her eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were the eyes of a cornered animal. "Play it," I said to Javi. He tapped the screen with trembling fingers. The room filled with Bianca's voice, cold, clinical, unrecognizable from the woman who'd cried in my living room about her dying husband. Final phase of the trial. Once we have the transplant data, the comparison metrics will be complete. Yes, she's prepped for surgery tomorrow. No, she doesn't suspect anything. The old woman thinks she's saving her precious son. A male voice responded, though the audio was muffled. And Miguel, is he stable? Stable enough. The compound has done exactly what they said it would. Kidney function at 17%. Perfect trial results. After tomorrow, we'll have everything we need. Donor and recipient tissue samples, progression data, the complete package. And the payment? Bianca's laugh was chilling. 6 figures. Enough to disappear once this is done. Miguel will recover eventually. These effects aren't permanent if we stop now. He'll be fine. Heartbroken when I leave, but fine. The recording ended. The operating room was deadly silent. Even the machines seemed to have paused their beeping. Dr. Patel was the first to recover. "Turn off the anesthesia," he ordered sharply. "This surgery is suspended." Through the window, I saw Bianca bolt for the exit, only to be intercepted by hospital security who had been standing just outside. Luis appeared behind them, his face grim with vindication. A nurse helped me sit up on the operating table. My hospital gown felt thin, inadequate armor against the horror of what I'd just learned. Javi climbed onto the table beside me, his small body pressing against mine. "I knew something was wrong," he whispered. "Mom's been giving Dad pills that make him sick. I saw her crush them into his food when she thought I wasn't looking." I wrapped my arm around his thin shoulders, trying to process the magnitude of betrayal. My son, my Miguel, poisoned by his own wife, for money, for data. Dr. Patel approached, removing his surgical mask. His expression was a mixture of shock and professional concern. "Mrs. Rosario, I don't know what to say. This is unprecedented." He gestured to a nurse. "Get the patient a wheelchair and contact the police immediately." The next hours passed in a surreal blur. Police officers filled the hospital corridors. I was moved to a private room where detectives took my statement. Luis stayed by my side, his hand steady on my shoulder as I recounted everything. The sudden illness, Bianca's pressure, the suspicious medications. Javi sat quietly in a corner. Chair, suddenly seeming smaller than his 10 years, the weight of his actions settling on his young shoulders. "You did the right thing, mijo," I told him when the detectives finally left. "You saved me. You saved your father." He looked up, his eyes swimming with tears. "Is Dad going to die now? Without your kidney?" Luis crouched before his nephew. "No, buddy. Your dad isn't as sick as your mom made it seem. The doctors are giving him medicine to counteract what she's been giving him. He's going to get better now. And Mom? Is she going to jail?" The question hung heavy in the air. Luis and I exchanged glances. "The police need to investigate everything first," Luis explained gently. "But what your mom did was very wrong." I watched my grandson absorb this. The betrayal of one parent, the endangerment of another, the impossible courage it had taken for him to act. No child should bear such burdens. Late that evening, a doctor I hadn't met before, a nephrologist, she introduced herself, came to my room. "Mrs. Rosario, I've been examining your son," she said, her voice calm and professional. "His condition, while serious, appears to have been artificially induced. We've found traces of a nephrotoxic compound in his system, something still in experimental phases, not approved for human use. We've begun treatment to flush it from his system. His kidneys have sustained damage, but with proper care, he should recover most function." Relief flooded through me. "So he doesn't need a transplant?" "No," she confirmed. "He doesn't. And he never did." The truth of what had nearly happened crashed over me in waves. I had almost been cut open, my organ removed, not out of necessity, but as part of an elaborate scheme. A scheme orchestrated by the woman my son had chosen to love. When they finally allowed me to see Miguel, I hardly recognized him. He lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by monitors, his skin ashen. But his eyes, when they found mine, filled with a terrible awareness. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice raw. "They told me what she did, what she's been doing all this time." Tears slid down his hollow cheeks. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." I took his hand, the hand I had once guided as he took his first steps, the hand I had bandaged countless times through childhood scrapes. It felt fragile now, the bones prominent beneath papery skin. No, hijo. I know you didn't. How can I ever face you again? He asked, anguish breaking his voice. My own wife, she was killing me slowly, using me, and she was going to use you too. I leaned down, pressing my forehead to his. Listen to me, Miguel. This is not your shame to carry. None of this is your fault. But Javi, my son had to save us both. A 10-year-old boy had to be braver than all of us. I thought of Javi in that operating room, standing tall against a room full of adults, his voice clear and certain. The image brought a strange pride through the horror. Yes, I agreed softly. He is very brave, like his father, like my son. Miguel turned his face away, but not before I saw the doubt there, the broken trust, not just in Bianca, but in himself, in his judgment, in his worth. As I left his room, I found Luis waiting in the corridor, his phone in hand, his expression grim. The police found more evidence at their apartment, he said quietly. Bianca was working with a pharmaceutical company testing an experimental drug. They needed data on how it affected kidney function and how kidneys recover after transplant. She's been documenting everything, sending them reports. They paid her to essentially use Miguel as a lab rat, and you were going to be part of the experiment too. The clinical coldness of it stole my breath. How could anyone do that to someone they married? Someone they claimed to love? Luis's jaw tightened. Some people don't know what love is, Mommy. They only know what they want. The police released Bianca on bail 3 days later. I learned this from our neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, who called to warn me that she'd seen Bianca entering their apartment building with her parents. She had the nerve to hold her head high, Mrs. Diaz reported, indignation sharp in her voice. After what she did to your boy. To you. I thanked her for the warning, then sat heavily on my sofa where Raphael watched me with concerned eyes. Although he couldn't speak, the stroke had left his mind intact. He understood everything. His hand reached for mine and I took it, drawing comfort from his familiar warmth. She's out, I told him. What if she tries to see Miguel at the hospital? What if she comes here? Raphael's fingers tightened on mine. Protection, even now, in the only way he could offer it. Luis called an hour later. I've taken care of it, Mommy. The hospital has been notified not to allow her in Miguel's room, and I'm coming to stay with you and Papa for a few days. What about your work? I protested. Work can wait. Family can't. That night, as Luis set up a makeshift bed on our living room couch, I stood at our small kitchen window gazing down at the street below. Jackson Heights was coming alive with evening activity, families returning from work, teenagers gathering at the corner bodega, the fruit vendor on Northern Boulevard packing up his unsold inventory. Normal life continuing, despite how thoroughly my world had been shattered. Do you think people know? I asked Luis. About what happened? He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. News travels fast in this neighborhood, but you have nothing to be ashamed of, Mommy? I'm not ashamed, I realized, surprising myself with the truth of it. I'm angry. I trusted her with my son, with my grandson, with my own body. The anger rose, unfamiliar and hot in my chest. She would have let them cut me open for money. Luis was silent for a moment. The important thing is she didn't succeed. Thanks to Javi. Javi. My heart twisted thinking of him, caught between his parents in this terrible situation. The hospital social worker had arranged for him to stay with Luis temporarily, deemed the most stable environment while the investigation continued. But a child needs his parents, or at least the parent who hadn't betrayed him. I want to see Javi tomorrow, I decided. He must be so confused, so hurt. He's been asking for you, Luis Chihuahua admitted. And for his father. The social worker said we can bring him to visit Miguel tomorrow afternoon. Sleep was elusive that night. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the operating room, felt the cold table beneath me, heard Bianca's voice on that recording. The old woman thinks she's saving her precious son. The casual cruelty of it stung more than the betrayal itself. Morning brought a knock at our door. Luis answered it cautiously, then relaxed. It's Detective Morales, he called to me. The detective, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, sat at our kitchen table. She declined coffee but accepted water, sipping it slowly as she explained the expanding investigation. We've identified the pharmaceutical company Bianca Rosario was working with, she said. Nexus Biosciences, a small research firm with a history of ethical complaints. They've been trying to fast-track a drug that protects kidneys during transplantation, Apparently, Mrs. Rosario approached them claiming she had access to willing test subjects. Willing? Luis's voice rose in disbelief. She poisoned her husband. Detective Morales nodded grimly. The company claims they believed the subjects had given informed consent. We're still investigating how much they knew about her methods. She turned to me. Mrs. Rosario, we've also found evidence that Bianca forged your signature on several research consent forms. My hand flew to my throat. I never signed anything like that. We know. The forgeries are good, but not perfect. She hesitated. There's something else. We found documentation in her possession suggesting this wasn't her first clinical trial. The implication hung heavy in the air. You mean she's done this before? Luis demanded. To other people? We're investigating 2 previous cases with similar patterns. Different cities, different names. Detective Morales' eyes were compassionate but direct. Your daughter-in-law appears to be what we call a medical research fraudster. She identifies pharmaceutical companies with specific research needs, then creates case studies using unwitting subjects. The data is valuable enough that companies sometimes don't ask too many questions about its source. I pressed my hand against the table to steady myself. How did Miguel not know who she really was? People like this are extremely skilled. At deception, Mrs. Rosario. They compartmentalize their lives completely. She closed her notebook. I should also inform you that Bianca Rosario surrendered her passport this morning, but she's legally allowed to collect personal belongings from her home. I've assigned an officer to monitor her movements. After the detective left, Luis and I prepared to visit the hospital. As I changed into my street clothes, I caught sight of myself in the bedroom mirror. I looked older, the lines around my eyes deeper than I remembered. But something else had changed too. A new resolve in my gaze, a straightening of my shoulders. Bianca had seen me as an old woman, easily manipulated through maternal obligation. But I was more than that. I always had been. At the hospital, we found Javi already in Miguel's room. My grandson was curled in a chair beside his father's bed, reading aloud from a dog-eared comic book. The scene, so normal, so precious, brought tears to my eyes. Miguel looked better. His color had improved, and some of the fluid retention that had made his face so puffy had subsided. When he saw me, complicated emotions crossed his face. Love, shame, gratitude, pain. Mommy, he greeted softly. Abuela! Javi abandoned his comic book and rushed to hug me, his thin arms squeezing with surprising strength. Over his head, Miguel and I locked eyes. We would need to talk, really talk, about everything that had happened, about trust broken and rebuilt, about moving forward, but not now, not in front of Javi. The doctor says I might go home next week, Miguel said. My kidneys function is improving faster than they expected. Luis settled into a chair. That's great news, hermano. Where will you go? I asked, the practical question hiding deeper concerns. Would he return to the apartment he'd shared with Bianca? Could he bear those walls, those rooms, knowing what had happened there? Miguel looked down at his hands. I don't know yet. I can't go back there. Not after. You'll stay with us, I said firmly. Both of you. I glanced at Javi, who was watching his father with worried eyes. We'll make room. Mommy, that apartment is too small for. Family makes room, I interrupted. Always. The gratitude in Miguel's eyes was painful to witness. My firstborn, my ambitious son who had always reached for more, now brought so low. As if reading my thoughts, he whispered, I trusted the wrong person, Mommy. I built my life on a lie. I took his hand, feeling the IV tape rough against my palm. No, you built your life on love. For Javi, for your work, for your family. That was never a lie. 2 weeks passed in a blur of hospital visits, police statements, and whispered conversations that stopped whenever Javi entered the room. Miguel's recovery progressed steadily, the nephrotoxic compound flushing from his system, his kidneys slowly healing. The doctor spoke of remarkable resilience and fortunate timing. I thought only of how close we had come to irreversible disaster. On a Tuesday afternoon, I was preparing arroz con pollo in my kitchen when the doorbell rang. Luis had taken Rafael to physical therapy, and I was alone in the Bao apartment. Through the peephole, I saw Bianca, designer sunglasses pushed up into her sleek hair, a Prada handbag clutched in manicured fingers. My heart hammered against my ribs. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but something stopped me. Perhaps the same steel that had allowed me to raise 2 boys in a foreign country with nothing but determination and faith. I opened the door, but kept the E. security chain in place. What do you want? Her perfect smile flickered. Carmen, may I come in? I think we should talk. We have nothing to talk about. It's about Miguel and Javi. She leaned closer, her expensive perfume drifting through the narrow opening. I'm still their family. The audacity nearly took my breath away. Family? You poisoned your husband. You were going to let them cut. Me open for money. Her expression hardened. That's a very dramatic interpretation of events. There are always two sides to every story. Not to this one. She sighed, as if dealing with a particularly difficult child. Look, the charges against me are being reduced. My lawyers are very good. I'll probably get probation, maybe community service. The pharmaceutical company is taking most of the blame, as they should. Something cold settled in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying, she replied, voice silky smooth, that I'll be returning home soon, and I expect my husband and son to be there. Miguel would never, wouldn't he? Her smile turned knife-sharp. Miguel has always chosen me, Carmen, over and over again, even when his precious mother didn't approve of our marriage, even when you suggested I wasn't good enough for your golden boy. She adjusted her designer watch. He'll forgive me. He always does. The confident certainty in her voice struck a painful chord. Miguel had always been drawn to Bianca's polished ambition, her cosmopolitan flair so different from our humble immigrant household. He had chosen her, again and again. And Javi? I managed. The son? You were willing to orphan? Something flickered in her eyes. Perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. I would never have let Miguel die. That was never the plan. The dosage was carefully controlled. Careful enough to destroy his kidneys to the point of needing a transplant? She waved dismissively. A calculated risk. The company needed comprehensive data, and the compensation would have set us up for life, Javi included. I was thinking of his future. By experimenting on his father? By deceiving everyone? By being smart, she snapped, composure finally cracking. By recognizing an opportunity when I saw it. Do you know how hard it is out there? How competitive? Miguel's pharmaceutical sales job barely covers our mortgage. Javi deserves better than paycheck to paycheck. Mediocrity. I stared at her through the narrow gap, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. Not as the polished, accomplished woman who had captured my son's heart, but as something hollow, something broken. You should leave, I said quietly, before Luis returns. This isn't over, Carmen. She stepped back, sunglasses sliding into place. Tell Miguel I'll be in touch about custody. Arrangements. My parents have already engaged a family lawyer. Custody? The word felt like a slap. Javi is my son, she said simply. And despite what you all think of me, I'm an excellent mother. After she left, I stood frozen in my small entryway. The apartment suddenly too quiet. Her threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Custody, lawyers, Miguel's forgiveness. Was she right? Would my son, once recovered, fall back under her spell? Would the courts really grant custody to a woman who had systematically poisoned her husband? That night, I confided my fears to Luis as we sat on the fire escape, sharing a pot of coffee and watching the Jackson Heights streets below come alive with evening energy. She came here threatening custody, I concluded, my hands shaking slightly as I refilled our cups. As if she has any right to Javi after what she did. Luis's jaw tightened. The courts will never give her custody once they know the full story. But what if Miguel takes her back? What if he defends her? Luis looked at me, surprise evident. You really think he would? After everything? I sighed, watching the steam rise from my cup. Love makes people blind, mijo, and she's very good at manipulation. You didn't see her today. So confident, so certain. Miguel is in the hospital because of her, Luis reminded me. She nearly killed him. She has an explanation for everything. The pharmaceutical company taking the blame, reduced charges, probation instead of prison. I shook my head. And Javi is still her son. No matter what she did, the courts favor mothers. Luigi was silent for a long moment. Then we need to make sure the full truth comes out in court. Everything she did, every detail. No plea deals, no reduced charges. Javi's future depends on it. The next morning, we brought Javi to visit his father again. Miguel was sitting up in bed, color returning to his face, eating hospital jello with feigned enthusiasm for Javi's benefit. When I mentioned Bianca's visit, his spoon clattered to the tray. She came to your apartment? His voice was tight with alarm. She says the charges are being reduced, I said carefully, watching his reaction. She mentioned coming home soon, and custody arrangements for Javi. Miguel's gaze darted to his son, who was flipping through a comic book in the corner chair, seemingly absorbed but, I suspected, missing. Nothing. Javi, buddy, Luis said gently. Why don't we go check out the vending machines? I bet they have those sour candies you like. After they left, Miguel covered his face with his hands. I can't believe this. After everything… Miguel. I took his hands in mine, forcing him to look at me. I need to know where you stand. With Bianca. His eyes widened in disbelief. Where I stand? Mommy, she poisoned me. She was going to use you like a lab rat. She betrayed everything. Our marriage, our family, basic human decency. Relief flooded through me. I needed to hear you say it. She seemed so certain you would forgive her, take her back. Bitterness twisted his features. That's Bianca, always so confident in her ability to control everything, everyone, even me. He looked away. Especially me. What do you mean? He was silent for a long moment. It's not the first time she's manipulated situations. For years, I thought it was just ambition, drive, the traits I admired in her. But looking back, he shook his head. There were patterns I should have recognized. Money that disappeared from our accounts. Friends who suddenly stopped calling. Job opportunities that mysteriously fell through unless we moved to a new city. I thought of Detective Morales' words. Different cities. Different names. Miguel, I asked carefully, do you think Bianca married you for a specific reason? He met my gaze, understanding dawning. Because I work in pharmaceutical sales. Because I have access to medical contacts. Drug trial information. His laugh was hollow. I was never her husband. I was her industry connection. The truth of it settled between us, heavy and painful. And now she wants Javi, I said softly. Over my dead body. His voice was steel, stronger than I'd heard in months. I won't let her near him again. Not ever. But legally? Legally, I'm going to fight with everything I have. Detective Morales found evidence of previous incidents. Other cities, other names. Once that comes to light, no court will grant her custody. He reached for my hand. I was blind, Mommy, but I'm not anymore. And I will protect my son. When Miguel was finally released from the hospital a week later, he moved into our small apartment just as I had insisted. Luis helped convert our living room into a makeshift bedroom for Miguel and Javi, with a pull-out sofa. For Miguel and an air mattress for Javi. Rafael's old armchair remained by the window, a silent sentinel over our expanded household. The apartment was crowded, noisy, chaotic, and somehow more alive than it had been in years. Rafael seemed to flourish with the constant activity, his eyes tracking conversations, his good hand occasionally reaching out to pat Javi's head as the boy raced past. Even his speech therapist noted improvement, citing the enriched environment as a possible factor. Miguel was quieter than I remembered, his confidence shaken by Bianca's betrayal. He moved carefully through our small rooms, as if afraid to take up too much space, to ask for too much. At night, I sometimes heard him pacing, the floorboards creaking beneath his restless feet. One evening, as I prepared dinner, stretching our usual portions to feed the expanded family, Miguel joined me in the kitchen. Without speaking, he began chopping vegetables, his movements precise, methodical. I never learned to cook, he said suddenly. Bianca always handled that. She handled everything, really. I glanced at him, my hands busy kneading dough for empanadas. You're learning now. He nodded, a small, determined gesture. I'm learning a lot of things now. Like what? Like how to be a real father to Javi, how to stand on my own. He looked up, his eyes, so like his father's, meeting mine. How to recognize what's real. I understood what he meant. Bianca had created a beautiful illusion. The perfect wife, the perfect home, the perfect life. An illusion that had nearly killed him. Real isn't always beautiful, I said, flattening the dough with my palm. But it's honest. I'd rather have honest ugliness than beautiful lies. He set down his knife. Mommy, I never thanked you for being willing to give me your kidney, even when you had doubts. I felt my throat tighten. You're my son. I would give you anything. I know. That's what she counted on. His voice hardened. She used that against you, against us all. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Luis entered, followed by Detective Morales. Their expressions told me everything. Something had happened. Miguel, the detective said, nodding and greeting before turning to me. Mrs. Rosario, we have an update on the case. May we sit down? Around our small kitchen table, the same table where I had first learned of Miguel's illness, Detective Morales spread out several photographs. We've confirmed Bianca Rosario's involvement in at least 2 previous medical fraud schemes, she explained. In Chicago 5 years ago, she was known as Bianca Mendez. In Atlanta before that, Bianca Cruz. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Medical data fraud using unwitting subjects. Miguel stared at Sam. The photographs. Bianca with different hairstyles, different clothing, but always that same calculating smile. I met her in Chicago, he said numbly, at a pharmaceutical conference. She said she was a medical researcher looking to network. Detective Morales nodded grimly. That tracks with her pattern. She targets men with access to the medical industry, cultivates relationships, then exploits those connections. What about the charges? Luis asked. She told our mother they were being reduced. Far from it. The DA is pursuing multiple felony counts: fraud, assault, criminal negligence. And with this new evidence of previous schemes, she closed her folder. She won't be getting probation, Mr. Rosario. She's looking at significant prison time. Relief should have flooded me. Justice was being served. Bianca would be punished. Javi would be safe. Yet all I could see was Miguel's face, the devastation there, the humiliation of having been so thoroughly deceived. The DA would like you to make a statement, Detective Morales continued. Both of you, actually. Your testimonies will be crucial. Of course, I agreed immediately. Miguel nodded silently. After the detective left, Miguel remained at the table, staring at nothing. Luis made coffee, the familiar ritual filling the kitchen with comforting aromas. Miguel, I said gently, this is good news. Javi will be safe. He nodded again. I know, but what do I tell him? How do I explain that his mother is going to prison? That everything she did was a lie? It was the question that had been haunting us all. Javi had saved both his father and grandmother with his bravery, but at what cost to his young heart? How does a child process such profound betrayal by a parent? The truth, Luis said firmly, setting coffee mugs before us, as gently as possible, but still the truth. Kids understand more than we think. But, Papa? Javi stood in the kitchen doorway, still in his school uniform, backpack dangling from one shoulder. His eyes moved from face to face, reading the tension there. What's wrong? Is it Mom again? Miguel's face crumpled for a moment before he composed himself. Come here, buddy. We need to talk about some grown-up things. As Javi climbed onto his father's lap, too big for it really, but needing the closeness, I saw the weight settling on my grandson's thin shoulders. The burden of, understanding too much, too young. Your mom did some bad things, Miguel began carefully. Things that hurt people. And when people do bad things, there are consequences. Javi nodded solemnly. Like when I pushed Derek at school and had to stay inside for recess. A ghost of a smile touched Miguel's lips. Something like that, yes. But more serious. Your mom is going to have to go away for a while, to a place where they send adults who break important laws. Prison, Javi said matter-of-factly. I know what prison is, Dad. Miguel's eyes closed briefly in pain. Yes, prison. Because she made you sick on purpose. Javi's directness was both heartbreaking and remarkable. And she was going to hurt Abuela too. Yes. Javi was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, is it my fault? Because I showed the recording? No! The vehemence in Miguel's voice startled us all. No, mijo. Never think that. You did exactly the right thing. You were brave and honest and good. The consequences are because of what your mother did, not because you told the truth. Javi leaned against his father's chest, suddenly seeming younger than his 10 years. Will I ever see her again? Miguel met my eyes over Javi's head, silent anguish evident. How to answer such a question? How to balance honesty with compassion? That will be up to you when you're older, Miguel finally said. But for now, you're going to stay with me, with us, with your family who loves you. Javi nodded against his father's shirt. Okay, just that. A child's acceptance of a reality he couldn't change. But I saw the tears soaking into Miguel's shirt, the small shoulders trembling with suppressed sobs. That night, long after Javi had fallen into exhausted sleep, I found Miguel on our small fire escape, staring out at the Jackson Heights night. I climbed out to join him, wrapping my cardigan tight against the autumn chill. You handled that well, I told him, settling beside him on the narrow metal platform. He shook his head. I don't know if there's a well in this situation, Mommy. Every option feels like failure. Not failure, I corrected gently. Just life. Messy, painful, beautiful life. We sat in silence, watching the lights of passing airplanes heading to nearby LaGuardia, each carrying people to unknown destinations, unknown futures. What happens now? Miguel finally asked, the question so broad it encompassed everything and nothing. Now, I said, taking his hand, we heal. All of us, together, one day at a time. The county courthouse stood imposing against the gray December sky, its stone facade a monument to justice. Cold, impartial, inevitable. I smoothed my best dress with trembling hands as Luis helped Rafael navigate the wheelchair ramp. Miguel walked ahead, his arm protectively around Javi's shoulders. Today was Bianca's trial, and we had all been called to testify. The prosecution had built a damning case. Financial records traced payments from Nexus Biosciences to offshore accounts linked to Bianca. Expert witnesses testified to the deliberate nature of Miguel's poisoning, the specific compound chosen for its kidney-targeting properties, the calculated dosage designed to create symptoms severe enough to justify a transplant without killing the subject. And most devastating of all, Detective Morales had uncovered Bianca's previous identities, the trail of manipulation, fraud, and abandoned lives stretching back nearly a decade. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, intimate in a way that made the proceedings feel both personal and invasive. As we entered, I caught sight of Bianca at the defense table. She wore a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a calculated departure from her usual polished appearance. Her eyes found mine, then shifted to Miguel, to Javi. Something flashed in her expression. Regret? Defiance? I couldn't tell. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Chen, had prepared us well for this moment. Just tell the truth, she'd advised during our preparation sessions. The facts speak for themselves. When my turn came to testify, I moved slowly to the witness stand, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. After being sworn in, Ms. Chen guided me through my testimony. The sudden onset of Miguel's illness, Bianca's insistence that I donate my kidney, the mounting pressure from all sides, Javi's timely intervention. And what would have happened, Mrs. Rosario, had your grandson not interrupted the surgery? Ms. Chen asked. I met Bianca's eyes across the courtroom. I would have given my kidney to my son, believing he needed it to live. Instead, it would have been used to generate valuable pharmaceutical data. They would have cut me open for profit. The defense attorney tried to paint Bianca as a devoted wife, caught in corporate pressure, a woman who had made poor choices under duress. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too established. Miguel's testimony was devastating in its quiet dignity. He described waking each day, feeling progressively worse, the confusion, the trust he'd placed in his wife as she prepared his meals, administered his vitamins. I believed she was taking care of me, he said, his voice steady but haunted. Instead, she was systematically poisoning me. When Javi was called, the judge had allowed special accommodations. He testified via closed-circuit television from another room, sparing him the trauma of facing his mother in court. His testimony was simple, direct, heartbreaking in its childlike clarity. I saw Mom putting things in Dad's food when she thought no one was watching, he explained, and she kept a special phone where she talked about making Dad sick and needing Grandma's kidney. I was scared my dad would die, and my grandma too. The defense declined to cross-examine him. Throughout the proceedings, I kept glancing at Bianca, searching for some sign of the woman my son had fallen in love with, some indication that she had ever truly cared for Miguel or Javi. But her face remained a mask of careful contrition, her eyes calculating even now. When the jury returned after deliberation, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Bianca to 12 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for at least 8 years. As the sentence was read, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for what could have been, for the family that never truly existed. As Bianca was led away in handcuffs, she paused near our row. Miguel, she said softly, I did love you, in my way. And Javi, her voice caught. I'm sorry. Miguel didn't respond, his gaze fixed straight ahead. But Javi, brave beyond his years, looked directly at his mother and said, I know, Mom. Nothing more. No forgiveness offered. No further accusation. Just acknowledgement of her humanity, flawed and broken as it was. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered like hungry birds. Miss Chen guided us to a side exit, away from the cameras and questions. In the parking lot, we huddled together against the December chill. "It's over," Luis said, squeezing my shoulder. Finally over. But was it? Justice had been served, yes. Bianca would pay for her crimes. But the wounds she'd left remained. In Miguel's cautious demeanor, in Javi's too serious eyes, in our family forever altered by betrayal. As we drove home through Queens, the streets festooned with holiday decorations that seemed jarringly festive, Javi broke the heavy silence. "Can we get ice cream?" Such a normal request, so incongruous with the weight of the day, that it startled a laugh from Miguel. "Ice cream? It's December, buddy." Javi shrugged. "So? Ice cream is good any time. Abuela says celebrations need something sweet." Miguel glanced back at me in the rearview mirror, a question in his eyes. I nodded. Yes, he decided. We absolutely can get ice cream. And so we found ourselves at a small ice cream parlor on Roosevelt Avenue, huddled around a sticky table with rainbow sprinkles and chocolate sauce dotting the surface like confetti. Rafael, who rarely showed emotion since his stroke, smiled as Luis dabbed a bit of vanilla ice cream on his lips. Javi created an elaborate sundae with every topping available. Miguel and I watched them, a small broken family finding its way back to joy. "Abuela," Javi said suddenly, chocolate smeared across his chin, "are we going to be okay now?" The simplicity of his question caught me off guard. Were we going to be okay? After everything, the betrayal, the trial, the public exposure of our most private wounds? I thought of our crowded apartment, of Rafael's silent strength, of Luis's unwavering support, of Miguel learning to cook in my kitchen, of Javi's brave heart. "Yes, mijo," I answered, with certainty I hadn't felt in months. "We are going to be okay now." That night, as I tucked Javi into his air mattress in our crowded living room, he grabbed my hand. "Abuela, I've been thinking, maybe we need a bigger place for all of us." I smiled, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "Maybe so. We'll figure it out. Dad says we can't afford it yet, but he's looking for a better job, and I'm saving my allowance. Are you now?" He nodded solemnly. $57 so far. It's a start, right? A start. Yes, that's what we had now. Not an ending, not a resolution, but a starting place for whatever came next. "It's a perfect start," I told him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. As I moved toward my bedroom, I paused at Raphael's chair by the window. He was still awake, watching the nighttime streets of Jackson Heights. His good hand reached for mine, squeezing with surprising strength. "Carmen," he said, the word clear and deliberate, one of the few he could still articulate. In that single word, I heard everything: pride, love, reassurance. I squeezed back, understanding perfectly. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it did so with exuberant abandon. The small garden plot behind our new apartment building exploded with color: crocuses, daffodils, hyacinths pushing through soil still cool from winter's grasp. Life returning, insistent and undeniable. We had moved in February, finding a ground floor 3-bedroom in Woodside that accommodated Raphael's wheelchair and gave everyone space to breathe. The rent stretched our budget, but Miguel had found a better position with a medical supply company, and Luis had taken on extra electrical jobs. Together, we made it work. Today was Javi's 11th birthday, and our small backyard garden was transformed with streamers and balloons. Raphael sat in his wheelchair beneath a shade umbrella, smiling as he watched Javi direct his friends in an elaborate game involving water balloons and invisible enemies. His speech therapy had progressed remarkably. He could now form short sentences, each word a victory. "He's happy," Raphael said clearly, nodding toward our grandson. I squeezed his shoulder. "Yes, he is." Finally. Miguel emerged from the apartment carrying a lopsided cake, his third attempt at baking, each one slightly less disastrous than the last. He had changed these past months, shed the polished veneer Bianca had cultivated in him, and discovered something more genuine beneath. He cooked, he cleaned, he helped Javi with homework. He joined a support group for single fathers, came home each week with new insights, new determination. "The masterpiece has arrived," he announced, setting the cake on the picnic table with mock ceremony. "Prepare to be amazed, or at least prepare to be kind about its appearance." Luis laughed, clapping his brother on the back. "It looks better than the last one. That's progress." As we gathered the children for cake, I watched Javi, the center of attention, blowing out candles, accepting gifts with genuine delight. The shadows that had haunted his eyes after the trial had gradually receded. Children are resilient. They heal if given love, security, honesty. We had decided, after careful consideration, to allow Javi to write to his mother in prison if he wished. The therapist he saw weekly had supported this decision, explaining that maintaining some connection, on Javi's terms when he was ready, would be healthier than absolute severance. So far, he had sent 2 letters, received 2 in return. Simple exchanges, superficial updates, a beginning of something neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but perhaps understanding. After cake and presents, as the children resumed their wild games, I found myself alone with Miguel at the picnic table, watching Luis supervise the water balloon battle to ensure no one got too carried away. "Thank you, Mommy," Miguel said, suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For taking us in. For being willing to give me your kidney. For not saying 'I told you so' about Bianca." I smiled, patting his hand. "I never liked her, it's true. But I never wished for this." "I know." He sighed, watching Javi shriek with laughter as a water balloon exploded near him. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. If I'd seen through her from the beginning. We can't live in what-ifs, mijo. They'll consume you." He nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. The support group leader said something similar last week. He said we have to look forward, not back. That our mistakes don't define us unless we let them. Wise man. He asked me what I'd learned from all this. What good had come from the pain? Miguel turned to me, his eyes, so like his father's, bright with emotion. I told him I learned what real family means, what love actually looks like. Not perfect, not polished, but present, honest. I felt my throat tighten. And what did he say to that? He said I was lucky, that some people never learn that lesson, no matter what life throws at them. Miguel's gaze returned to Javi. "I don't feel lucky, exactly, but I feel grateful, even after everything." As the afternoon mellowed into evening and the birthday guests departed, our family gathered in the small yard. Rafael insisted on helping with the cleanup, his movements slow but purposeful. Luis and Miguel bickered good-naturedly about the proper way to fold the picnic table. Javi, exhausted but happy, leaned against my side as we collected discarded wrapping paper. "Best birthday ever, abuela," he declared. "Really? Better than Disney World last year?" Bianca had insisted on that extravagant trip, I remembered. Now I wondered if it had been funded by her illegal activities. Javi nodded with certainty. "Way better. Because everybody's happy for real. Not pretend happy. Out of the mouths of babes. Such wisdom. Such perception." I hugged him close, marveling at this child who had seen through deception when adults couldn't, who had saved us all with his courage. Later that night, after Javi had fallen asleep surrounded by his new treasures, I sat on our small patio with Rafael. The spring evening was cool but pleasant, the neighborhood quiet except for distant traffic and the occasional burst of music from an open window. "I never thought we'd be here," I told him softly. "Starting over again at our age." Rafael's good hand found mine. "Good start," he said deliberately, each word clear and precious. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Yes, a good start. The next morning, I rose early as always, the habit of decades unbroken by our changed circumstances. I made coffee, the rich aroma filling our new kitchen. One by one, my family joined me. Rafael wheeling himself to his spot by the window, Luis rushing in for a quick cup before heading to a job, Miguel preparing Javi's lunch for school. Normal moments, ordinary life, the precious gift we had nearly lost. As I watched them, I remembered lying on that operating table months ago. The cold fear, the sense of being used. I remembered Javi, bursting through the doors, brave and terrified. I remembered the truth spilling out, ugly and necessary. We had all been changed by what happened, wounded certainly, but also strengthened. We had discovered what we were made of when tested. We had learned who we could truly count on. We had found that family is not defined by obligation, but by choice, by presence, by love that remains when everything else falls away. Outside, spring sunlight filtered through new leaves. Inside, my family moved through morning routines, occasionally bumping into each other in the small kitchen, apologizing, laughing, continuing. I watched them all, these precious people who had weathered a storm with me and thought, this is what matters, this is what endures, not the grand gestures or the perfect appearances, but the quiet truth of showing up day after day, of choosing each other again and again. In the end, that was our victory. Not against Bianca or corruption or greed, but for ourselves, for the truth of who we were, who we could be together. I touched the small scar on my side where no incision had ever been made, where no kidney had been taken. It had faded with time, just a shadow. Now, like the pain, like the betrayal. Not gone, never forgotten, but no longer defining us. Time for school, Javi, Miguel called. Got your science project? Got it. Javi hugged me quickly. Bye, abuela. Love you. Love you too, mijo, I replied, watching him race toward the door, backpack bouncing, life rushing forward. The truth, I realized as I washed breakfast dishes in sink warm with morning sunlight, always finds its way to the surface. Not dramatically, not vindictively, but quietly, persistently, like spring flowers pushing through concrete, like love surviving betrayal. Some truths cost everything to speak, others heal everything when heard. The wisdom lies in knowing which is which and finding the courage to voice them anyway.